Mr. Guerrero enters the room, making him present.
Today.
Yeah, I know the feeling. So, right, and then so if we do go ahead and continue the roll call with Deputy Mayor Francisco Guerrero present, Mr. Councilman Hicks, and Councilman Henry and Councilman Strimler and Mayor Hart are all here, with the exceptions of Dean Boersma, who had an excused absence this evening, and Jim Restucci, who requested an excused absence this evening. Is there any objection to giving Mr. Restucci an excused absence? Hearing none, he receives an excused absence for this evening. Okay, so the only item we have before us this evening is our revenue discussion, all funds. And when I looked through the thing, it looked like there were 21 pages of, okay, well, I only got as far as 21 pages, so it'll be, we'll be moving right along then. So, Mr. City Manager, would you like to?
Madam Mayor, Council, ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight to start our budget workshops. So tonight we want to focus on revenues, and so I'm going to turn the floor over to Elizabeth to discuss our projected revenues. We've kind of set this up already. We need to figure out ways to increase revenues or decrease services. So the revenues, again, we've had discussions in the past about increasing utility rates, ambulance utility fees, transportation benefit district. So that's what we want to talk about. If we don't do something, we're probably going to have to cut positions. That's where the biggest expenses go, so that's kind of where we're at. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Elizabeth to direct the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Day, Mayor and Council. You will notice that there's a little bit different format this year, and kind of what my goal is I'm providing you with a notebook, and you can use this as I pass out papers or as we have things to look at on the budget. And what I really hope is that tonight we can focus on revenues, and then you'll bring this same booklet back with you on the 16th when we are scheduled to do expenditures, and then we'll start kind of matching these up. And I want to let you know you won't see line items. I have a line item one if there's something there's a question on or something that we need to really dig down deep on. But I'm trying to keep this at the 30,000 foot level for your discussion. And then if you see fit to change the direction on where our revenues are going, just let me know and we'll rework our numbers and come back with revisions. So tonight you'll have Delilah Sines, who used to be the city clerk. She's getting to come tonight to be my note taker and make sure that everything you direct me to do, we actually take care of before the next meeting. So the very first thing in your packet, and the only thing right now, is a 5-year budget comparison. And so if you'll look on page 1, what I really wanted to show you is from 2013 through 2017, it gives you your actual results, and these are 5 years side by side. So when I took a look at this, I really looked at where are some areas that we're not seeing very much growth, where are areas that we're actually seeing declines, and then that was where I looked at my 2018 year-to-date, and then I also looked at what we were doing in 2019 and what our plans are. So just in the general fund, if you look at our beginning balances, obviously in 2017, a negative beginning balance of $64,000 is not a good result. So because of that, in 2018, we now have to make sure that we make up for that $64,000. So, yes.
Last year, right at the end of the year, and this was I believe this was in the December meeting, we had a balance of somewhere in the area of 50,000. Now it's showing a minus 64,000.
This is a beginning balance for 17. So basically, it wasn't a true beginning balance until I balanced the books. So until every expenditure and everything is put across my desk, then I don't have a true picture until we're all the way done with the year and we've looked at everything. So in 17, we did have an actual negative balance. Okay? And that's offset by the contingency fund. So the contingency fund will roll into that fund. Does that make sense? So you'll see it only here in the general fund, but when I actually do an annual report, I roll the contingency fund into that fund, and it becomes that $400 and some thousand we have in there offsets that negative 64,000. Okay.
And that number can change a little bit from the end of the year because you still have bills coming in and different
Correct.
things that are coming in, which is why that number changes.
Exactly.
From December 31st to.
And actually, by
something.
state law, we have until the 20th of December to pay all of our prior year commitments. And so we can have things that come in those last 20, they're the first 20 days of the fiscal year, but they're attributable to the last year. And it does make a difference to our balances.
Madam Chair, I just want to clarify, she meant January 20th, not
sorry,
December 20th.
not
Yes.
December.
I
January.
understood that,
Made
but
that.
thank you for making that
Yeah, I just
clarification.
want that clarified for the
Yeah.
audience.
Yes, thank you. And please, if I sound like I'm a little loopy, it's because I've been drinking this for a few days and dreaming about it and all those kind of things. So I just wanted you to have the information that I thought was really crucial, and I think that having a 5-year look back is really important so that we can at least see where we've been and where we need to go. And you'll also note that in our taxes, they've increased a little bit, but they don't increase significantly. The only way to increase those taxes are with our utility tax. That's really the biggest way. We have a 1% limit on our property taxes. We are not allowed to increase any more than that. So 1% doesn't equate to a very large increase in taxes. Intergovernmental revenues, you're going to see that will change as we have grants that come in. So revenues will go up as there's grants, go down as the grant is completed. Charges for goods and services, that's going to also be one that may go up or down depending on what kind of activities we have in the general fund. The one that I will note, fines and penalties. This one is a steadily declining. It started in 13 at $371,000 and ended in 17 at $243,000. This is our collections for the most part for our court. So our court revenues are down.
Elizabeth, on the intergovernmental revenue, 330, 2017 appropriated says 4.181 million. Is that
Well,
the
that's
report?
appropriated. So that's the budget.
The budget itself.
Yes. And so what I have a feeling there is that budget may have been inflated by some kind of grant that didn't come through.
Okay.
And that happens. We've in fact just recently learned of a grant that we budgeted for, and then it didn't happen. So basically, it just didn't get taken back out of the budget during the amendment process in 17.
Okay.
So the appropriated column is what the budget was for that. And then just kind of to go along here in the general fund, you will note that in 2015 we have a negative non-revenue of $370,000. And what that is that's a prior year adjustment. We found that some of the revenues that were belonging to the 140 fund ended up in the general fund just as they were just receipted incorrectly. So we had to go in and do a prior year correction. And so that contributes to revenues in the general fund as a negative because we actually needed to put them in the right place. Interfund transfers, you'll note that there's an interfund transfer in 2013. We did not do them in 14, and then in 15 we did. This is the audit finding that we had that was saying we needed to use cost allocation instead of interfund transfers. So that's why that revenue is basically gone. It is not gone, but now it has went to the basically allocation of costs. Instead of transferring in money from the water sewer funds, we actually allocate what they should be charged out. Okay. So any questions on those so far? I know it's a lot of information to digest, so I'm not going to really focus on this. I want to just kind of show you some highlights, some areas that I see, we really need to kind of take a look at. Jail services, this one has 2 spots. So in 13 and 14, it was its own fund. So if you turn the page to 2, you'll see its actual numbers for 13 and 14. And then the rest of it is in 15, 16, 17 on the previous page. And what that was is we used to have an actual separate fund for the jail, and I basically moved it into the general fund, so it's a part of the 001 fund. And the same thing with the recreation fund. You'll see that the recreation fund has 2013 and 14 at zeros on page 1, but then those are found on page 2.
On the jail services, you think we're going to be at the 835, or are we trending more towards the 2016, 2017 level?
I think we're going to actually be declining in the jail services, and I'll give you a report to show where I think we're at with that. After doing some analysis, there are a few jail contracts with the Spokane facility opening that we will probably see a decline in.
Okay. So you don't think we'll hit the 835 mark?
I hope so.
Okay.
And I've got a report just as soon as we're done with the 5-year comparison. I'll give you a report on where I think we're at, and that'll be the next one we'll go through. So this is just a look back at the last 5 years for all of you, in case you haven't been on council for 5 years, or you just want to see where we've been for the last 5 years. This summarizes all the revenues for 5 years. So on page 3, you'll see the West Sunnyside Business Park. That, again, is one of the funds that I converged. So you'll find it actually in with all the other things in the general fund. It just was all by itself when it was in its own fund in the 007 fund. Payroll liability balance, this is on page 4. And this is the fund that has caused me quite a bit of grief. And this is the fund that really, really caused our auditors a lot of grief. What this is when we were doing payroll imports from Eden, we would import the payroll into Bias, and we would have items that we couldn't identify or that just had a number, and we'd have to go do research on them. So this would represent the debit side or the credit side of Eden because it was a double entry system and Bias was not. And so we had a mess with this fund. And basically what it should look like is what it looks like in 2017, where you see these 16,756.66. And what that represents is all outstanding payroll like payables. So anything that we owe, so let's say that we collect from the employees employment taxes. So let's say we collect L&I taxes. This would be the portion that we have collected on a paycheck but haven't paid yet because the bill isn't due. So really this balance should usually hover right around $20,000 at the most. And because we had all of this mess in 14, 15, and 16, it caused quite a bit of confusion for auditors and then us trying to make sure we had the right balances. So with our payroll import being into Bias, we shouldn't have that problem ever again with that payroll liability. Street fund, you can see street fund in 17 actually had a negative beginning balance as well, and some of that was project in nature. So we had expenditures for a project in 16 that we didn't receive the money until 17, and that caused some negative balances. And we will have that kind of thing happen quite often if we have a project that we've already expended the money and haven't actually gotten the reimbursement back from the organization that's given us the grant.
Is that what the intergovernmental revenue kind of places?
Yes, that's the placeholder for that. And you can see it's kind of all over the place. In 2014, the $4.2 million, that's the downtown project finish up. And, you know, really this fund is supposed to support the city match, and a lot of times there isn't enough money to support the city match in the street fund. So again, you have an issue where we have a match. So let's say that the grant we get is $100,000. The funding agency says there's a 10% match. That means they're going to give us $90,000, and we have to come up with a $10,000 to pay out of that fund. And this fund very rarely has enough money to support the match. Questions so far? Okay, on page 5, we have the contingency fund, and we have kept this fund at a good balance, but it does roll up into the general fund. So when we have shortages in the general fund, it does take those shortages in our annual report and report them against this. So it does have a balance of $403,691 as of 17, and I will give you updated balances as we go. Again, this one we want to increase. We want to be able to put some money into this fund and build it to a good reserve amount, but we just haven't been able to do that in the last 5 years. We haven't been able to increase it. Investigative fund, this fund pretty much stays about the same. There are fines and penalties that are put in there, and this is all depending on the nature of the fine, and if we have a lot of fines being imposed, then we'll see more revenues in this fund, but really it's stayed pretty stagnant over the last 5 years and not had a lot of earnings.
Just out of curiosity, these fines that you're talking about, these are of criminal nature?
That is correct. So these come from the court. And that would be the same thing for the police department crime prevention. This fund is for dissemination of crime material, or, like I don't know how to exactly say it, but basically it's for the dissemination of materials to help fight crime, and that's basically the assessment that's put on by the court. So this fund has that specific purpose to...
Which one? The
130 fund, the crime prevention fund.
crime prevention, okay.
So if you have somebody that is in court and they maybe tag something, then this can be assessed against that particular crime, and then we can use this to abate the kind of things and also buy materials to help, combat that.
Well, I'm just looking back at this 5-year plan on the investigative fund. 1 year was $86.
And you just don't know how many times it'll be assessed. And we don't have any real control over that because it's set by the court and by the judge.
Okay.
So crime prevention, this fund has, been a little more consistent, but you can see that there were some larger fines and penalties in 2014, and I didn't investigate what those were. I just basically ran the report so that I could run through and see where we were at in the last 5 years. Public safety tax, this is where that big minus $370,000 really comes into play, and you can really see it. In 2014, the actual taxes is zero. You'll see in 15 we have a non-revenue, and that's where I made that correction.
Is this 3% tax, the one that...
This is the 3/10.
Okay, 3/10.
And this is tied to the actual, is this one tied to sales tax? Yes, this one is tied to sales tax. Mm-hmm. So it'll depend on your sales for the year. Tourism Expansion Fund. This one is the hotel motel tax. And in this fund, we've tried to keep a healthy balance and not, have our beginning balance go below so that we have enough to fund the activities for this fund. General obligation bonds, you'll see in 2017 some kind of really strange numbers, and that would be refinancing. And this was our debt refinancing last year. Community Development Block Grant, page 8. So what this is I want to say about 15 years ago, we offered rehab loans to homeowners that wanted to improve their house, and they were through this grant. And so all of the payments that they make on that come into the city, and then eventually we will need to expend these monies once there's a balance that is basically towards something, but it would have to be part of a CDBG grant. So we would have to, no, Don, we just need to spend them. That's right.
Madam Mayor, if I may,
Yes, please.
we have to spend that on any community development project. It's our money to spend.
And that's correct. And I think we've already kind of got that earmarked for the bridge project.
Yes. Or at least Shane and I do.
Surprise.
Okay, and then the next one is the 304. This is the REIT 1. And you can see again, this fund has healthy beginning balances, does have taxes that come in, and it's earning some interest even on its cash balances. So this fund has healthy revenues and a stream of healthy revenues.
How often do we get these REIT 1 and 2 from the state?
They come in on our monthly remittance from them, and it'll depend on the number of real estate transactions. So we don't have any way of actually predicting. It could really vary, and you can see if you look at the taxes. In 13 it was 59, in 14 it was 48,000, in 15 it was 140. So it does swing wildly.
Okay.
So it's one of those funds that we should kind of keep an eye on and make sure that we don't spend too far down on it and keep a healthy balance there. Local capital improvement, so REIT 2. And this fund as well has, a fairly good tax base. We keep the beginning balances increasing. So at this point, we've done a good job of making sure there are funds there. Fire Equipment Reserve Fund. This was actually a leftover from the fire station project a little bit. And this we're keeping in here for fire equipment. I'd like to see it be, like several zeros behind that actual, so that we could buy fire equipment like a new truck. But I know that that's kind of pie in the sky for right now. So you'll see the fire station project, it is complete, and the $28,548 was moved over to the Fire Equipment Reserve Fund. And that's just there for historical purposes. Water Fund on page 10. Water Fund is healthy. We've had a 5-year plan of water fund rate increases, and it has kept our fund in a positive balance. And you'll see our charges for goods and services in 17 is just in the wrong spot. So just one of those things, ignore the line item. I flipped them on accident. So it should be actually charges for goods and services and not interest earnings. Water Bond Reserve Fund. This is a new fund created in 2017. And when I went to refinance our bonds, I found out that we had to have a reserve of the next year's payment. And in order to make sure that we financed and that the financing went through, I needed to get this in our funds. So this is just basically a placeholder to pay for next year's bond payment. And this is half of water's portion, and then sewer would have the other half. So this is just a fund where we hold half of next year's payment. And the 415 water sewer revenue bond in 18 and 19, when you look at those budgets and when you come up, this fund has actually been split, and now it's only the water revenue bond fund so that I can split all the transactions out by themselves. So in 17, it's showing them together, but then in the future, they'll be split. Same thing with water sewer capital projects. This 416 fund will now be water capital projects, and it's my hope that in future we can start actually putting capital projects in here and actually moving capital from water to this fund so that it serves and stands alone without sewer incorporated together. The 420 or sewer fund, again, another fund that has maintained a healthy balance. We did in the previous year decide to do the screw press. So you'll see in future revenues, that is a declining beginning balance only because that was a planned expenditure. And then you'll see the 421 fund. This is again the reserve fund to pay the future debt payment. And then the 425 is where I'll actually expend the revenue bonds. They'll actually come out of there. And again, the big balance in there is because we refinanced. This was the other set of refinancing. And then 426 is the sewer capital projects fund. Again, I'd like to try to move capital projects into these separate funds for water and sewer. Garbage fund, 430. You will see in 2015 a negative beginning balance, 2016 a negative beginning balance. This fund has exacerbated me to no end, trying to figure out why we're negative. And I think on Friday I had an epiphany. I don't want to share it yet because I have legal doing some research for me. Once I know, I will give you the results. But basically, we've done several audits on our garbage and how we're billed, and we think that there's some issues there.
2017 actual has some taxes in there.
Yes.
Not the prior years.
Because there's two ways you can do the taxes. So there's two separate taxes on garbage. One is the state tax, which is 3.6, and the other is our utility tax. I found out in 17 that we were charging the garbage fund for the taxes, but we were not putting the revenue for the taxes in there. So that contributed to being upside down a little bit. So the revenues were going into the general fund and the payments were coming out of the garbage fund. So that's a big deal.
Right.
So in 17, I corrected that.
But you're still doing some investigating.
I have a lot of investigation, and I'm confident that there's an outcome, and I'm hoping it's an outcome that's in the city's favor. But at this point, I just don't want to get too deep into it, but I will have more information this week. And hopefully more information by the time we get to the expenditures on the 16th, so I can give you a report. Ambulance fund. This fund, we're showing a negative beginning balance in 17, and let me give you a little history here on this one. So there was a study done, I want to say in 2012, on how our fire department actually was funding and what services they were actually doing, and it was determined that it was a 60-40 split. So 60% on the ambulance side and 40% on firefighting. So the city was going to appropriate things on a 60-40 split. Well, we found out that Eden was opposite. So whenever we would do a payroll and it would be 60-40, it was being done the opposite way.
Ouch.
So the ambulance fund was having expenditures higher than what they should have. Or, excuse me, it was the opposite. But what that does is that causes a negative beginning balance in your revenues for 2017. So when you do all of the math, so basically what we had to do in 16 and 17 is we actually had to run the numbers for everybody for the whole year and then make a manual correction for those. Questions on that?
That must have been kind of scary when you realized that was what the deal was.
You know, a lot of things in Sunnyside have been difficult to overcome, but I'll tell you, every time we find something like this, we just say, okay, what do we need to do to get it corrected? And there have been a lot of hands and a lot of turnover in Sunnyside, and I think that having the same department heads and having the same people on the same page really does help. It helps really to have enough time to have somebody take a second look at your numbers, have someone proof your work, because we're not at all infallible, and I think that that's really a lot of our downfall is not having enough time, just keeping ahead.
I think that's true. Thank you.
So the next fund is the stormwater fund, and you'll see that in 2017, this one actually had a negative beginning balance, and again, when we went to the cost allocation plan, we saw that there were some things that were really being charged to some of these funds that maybe shouldn't have been or should have been. So a lot of the differences you're seeing in the revenues are directly tied to how we've funded the expenditures. And this is another one where we had expenditures that exceeded our revenues because we were just plucking through interfund transfers, which you can see in 15 and 16. And actually we did some in 13. We had these interfund transfers as revenues. And when you take that away and you start actually allocating based on cost, it changes your model. And it changes how much you actually have to work with. Next one is the Eden Unearned Revenue Contra Fund. This is a fund that only existed in 13 and is an example of switching utilities, switching payroll and everything from Eden to Bias. And so it'll only exist there in 13, but it is a part of what we had to come in is what they called non-revenues. And that's going from double entry accounting to single entry accounting. Equipment Rental Fund. This fund should only have charges for goods and services. You'll see in 13, 14, and 15. It has interest and other earnings. We have interfund transfers. The way this fund is set up is right now we are basically calling it a static fund. We only charge out what we spend. So we don't have any extra in there to purchase vehicles. But the nice thing would be is if we could ever get some revenues built up and have a fund balance here, then we would start funding our own equipment. And that's what this fund is supposed to serve as. Public Works Service Center, we eliminated this fund and absorbed it into the water sewer funds. The people that actually were using the Public Works Service Center, those all went to the funds that actually use it. So Street Fund got some of those expenditures and some of the revenue. So there's where that kind of hits on. Information technology, again, this fund should serve as charges for goods and services. This should be what we actually spend, and it should be at a zero at the end. So our revenues should match our expenditures. Eventually, it'd be nice, again, if this one had a little bit of a balance to fund future projects. Jail Trust Fund, anything with a 600 level or higher is considered a fiduciary fund. We are not really... we're holders of people's money, basically. And we act in a fiduciary nature for the jail trust fund, for the court trust fund, and the state court fines. So these should just basically be placeholders for the account, and how much revenues really just depends on, and you can see it says non-revenues, and that's because it's not our money, we're holding other people's money. When you get down to the firefighters relief and pension fund on 611, this fund actually has a growing balance, and it is intergovernmental revenues. You'll see that it's every year has contributions. That is the fire prevention insurance, I believe that it's called. And we'll get to that when I give you a new report. Police Department Honor Guard. This fund has had this same balance since I've started, and I'm not quite sure what we ever will do with it. Just let it sit there until we know where to put it or what to do with it. It's one of those things that's been on here, and because it's fiduciary, we have to do a lot of research to figure out who it should go to. And really, you guys have seen what I've been doing for the last 4 years, so it's low on my list at $4,000. So questions on this so far? Okay, in your book, you will have now the 2019 proposed budget changes. Pass out? Okay.
Thank you.
No.
Thank you.
Do you want Delilah's? Yeah. You want 'em?
I'll give you this one. I'll make sure she has this one.
Well, then the
Do you want another one?
Sorry,
Make sure I
guys.
get back so I can get them in the box.
So you should have two documents. You should be on this page right here. And this is now a summary and gives you our 2018 budget and now our 2019 proposed changes. And in order for you to see kind of what I did and where I went, this document here actually is a summary of everything that went into the differences between 18 and 19. So in the general fund on page 1, you'll see our beginning balance in 2018 was $350,000, and I'm really hoping we can get to $100,000. So that means that I'm knocking it down by $250,000. I'm trying to be conservative instead of pie in the sky. If we can finish 18 with $100,000, I'd be really happy with that, and not dip into the contingency fund at all. The next line item is taxes, and you'll see your taxes are increased by 3.5%. So let me tell you how I came about with doing taxes. So on the summary of proposed budget changes, you'll see under the section 310, increasing the city-owned utility tax from 19 to 29% gives us an increased revenue of $334,000. And I'm looking at also a decrease of $100,000 in the B&O tax on utilities. And where I'm getting that decrease is by looking at my actual year-to-date in 2018, and it has been declining. And I'm sure that is due to the fact that more people have a cell phone versus a home phone. So this is the net increase or decrease for taxes.
You're proposing that we increase our city-owned utility tax from 19 to 29%?
So I have another fun page that we'll get to when we go a little farther down the budget. But I have actually a page that summarizes all the increases that would be on someone's water bill. We've actually got a sample for you, so you can look at what the actual net would be versus the bill today. So we pulled somebody's bill that we actually printed on Friday and ran the numbers with the proposed increase. Okay, and there's several of them, so I'll wait till we get a little farther down, and then we can kind of look at them all and hash them out. License and permits, building permit fees, valuation table update. So what this is I reached out to all departments and said, do you have any proposed increases? What are they, and how much do you think that they will impact us? Jamie let me know that his table that he'd been using for valuation was outdated and that we needed to use a current table. So we pulled the new one, and there's this about a 20% increase on the valuation fees. And since at the last city council meeting we did have 3 developments, 2.5, I guess, with the mobile home court, that we know are coming in. We think it's very important that we are valuing at the building valuation data at the most recent data. So we've got a report from February of 18 that there's a change there. And it looks like from what I'm reading, there's also one that came in August of 18. So we'd like to bring forward to council that we enact that the most current building valuation data is the one that we'll use, and that we won't have to come back every single time to ask for that increase, that we'll just always use the current table. And this is from the International Code Council, so this is based on what we're actually using for our code now.
Pardon?
So we're already using the International Code, we just didn't update to use the fee table. So we're using the code, but we're not using the fee table. We're using an outdated fee table.
So basically, then we're going to go ahead and make it part of the language so that as the table changes, those just automatically go into effect.
Right. So that we aren't coming back to you every 6 months and asking for a change, that we will just implement and say that every time that the International Code Council has a building valuation data update, that we incorporate that as part of our rates.
Just right off the top, you're saying that increases by 20% just by doing it now.
Right. The table we are using is very outdated.
Okay.
330 intergovernmental. This is the FEMA grant from DHS, and this is Fire is bringing this forward. So this is projected to be $171,500. Charges for goods and services. You'll see that we have court services in Toppenish. That has increased our general fund by $135,000. The fire DNR reimbursement, again, this is another one that Fire has brought forward, $44,000. Annual fire safety inspections, $75,000, and then plan checking fees, an additional $15,000.
What is that one? Plan checking fees.
So those are the fees when somebody comes in with their set of plans, that we actually have a plan reviewer to make sure that they have all the right setbacks and all of the requirements for their plans.
For their building.
Uh-huh. Fines and penalties, $350. You'll see that I looked at our 5-year trend when we were looking at that. The court penalties are trending down, so I've decreased them by $21,000.
Is that just a reimbursement or what we're finding to offenders?
So these are only revenues. So these are what people are actually paying in tickets.
So we have to look at maybe our collection agency, see if we need to switch them or something if they're not collecting.
There's a lot of ways to look at revenues. The unfortunate thing for us is we don't have very much control over what the judge decides. Mm-hmm. But I do think that with a new court administrator that she may have a fresh set of eyes to look at something. So I'm hoping that she can do some analysis. And I've already kind of set her on that to see if there's some things that maybe we're missing. 380 non-revenues, hazmat and other cost recovery. Again, this is one that came from Ken. Very, very nice that he considered this. This is when we go out on a fire and it is attributable to a business, and we can ask for the cost recovery of our actual expenses. So this would be when, there's a, give me an example, Ken.
Hazmat. We had the DRR hazmat.
Yeah.
Everybody carries, these businesses carry insurance for incidents like this. And so this is not going to the actual business, this is going to their insurance carrier.
But this is in case of a liquid spill.
Yes.
That sort of thing.
Yeah. So these are collections that we can look for from recovery when we actually go out onto a site.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
this could also, council, this could also be applied to people that are burning when they're not supposed to burn. If you have a burn and somebody decides to burn some ditch weeds or whatever in town and not supposed to do that, you charge them regardless. You send them a bill.
All right.
So other financing, so new loans for police vehicles, you'll see that it's down quite a bit. And that is because I am not going to recommend purchasing any new vehicles for 2019. I think that we can pass on 1 year and see where we go from there. So I'm recommending a 0 on that one. Jail services, this is where the answer for the detention services, U.S. Marshals and other decreases, we're looking at $464,000 decrease.
That's a huge amount.
Huge amount. And we make it up a little bit on, local, but the U.S. Marshals building in Spokane is complete, so we will still house some of their prisoners, but we won't be housing the large number we were because their facility wasn't done. Parks and Recreation Services, you'll see that I have put increased fees for pool admission, so I'm going to be bringing those forward. Lessons, season passes, pool rentals, and park rentals. One of the things that I'll probably be recommending as well is taking a look at how we can make our pool at least maybe break even, but I don't think it'll ever break even, but at least at a minimum. I've got a few ideas that Lander and I have kind of put forward on ways that we can increase the revenues. In 2018, he tracked the number of patrons so that we could see when our ebb and flow is. And so we've got a few ideas on how to make it a little more lucrative for the city as far as breaking even. So I'm not trying to say we're going to make money, because that is not a revenue maker, but at least recoup some of our costs.
I was just wondering, one of the things that you I remember at the end of the swim season this year, we talked about having a movie in the pool, and some other kinds of things like that. Of course, we had that smoke,
Right.
which kind of canceled that, mamas and their babies in the pools, lessons, that sort of thing.
Right.
So some things like that, I'm imagining is what you're also talking about a little bit. Just creative ways of using the pool.
And really, we've seen that weekend use of the pool is less than during the week, and I suspect it's a lot of times when mom and dad are at work, the kids, go swimming, and then on the weekends they have plans. So we've even considered possibly closing the pool to the general public on either Saturday or Sunday and offering rentals during those times, because we actually recoup more of our money during the rental of the pool. And I think that families would appreciate that they could come in and have a birthday party and rent the pool or something like that. So we're looking and taking a real hard look at how we can create a more positive revenue stream for the pool. Mm-hmm. So we're going to just look at everything next year. Street fund, you'll see there was a negative beginning balance in 2018, and then we closed the TIB grant. So whenever you have a grant on there and then it actually closes, it does kind of make it look like you're losing revenues, but you're really not. You're actually just decreasing because of a grant. And hopefully it decreases the same on the expenditure side and you don't feel it. But often we don't have the reserves set aside for our match, so you'll see us upside down in this fund.
Talking about TIB grant, I noticed that they fixed that street going from the Valley Racket and Fitness. They just finished that section that was really, really bad. That was a county, right? It wasn't us.
That's
County, yeah.
Yeah.
Schooner Road.
Yeah, it's.
It's still bad.
I know it was horrible, but it sounds like they finally got around to it, so it's not nice.
Beautiful now, I use it every day.
Okay, so our next section is the contingency fund, and I have no real material changes for 2019. So basically, I'm going to try to set aside $75,000 into that fund like we have tried for the last couple years. If my general fund is negative again, I won't be doing it. I'll be coming back and saying it's a no. Investigative fund, no material changes for 2019 on the revenue side. Because there's just really that investigative fund just doesn't have a lot to add to. Police Department Crime Prevention Fund, I looked at where we're at currently in 2018, and it looks like we will have an increase of $25,000. The crime prevention assessment is declining, so I've reduced that by $3,500, and then our donations to National Night Out declined by about $1,200, and that goes directly into this fund because it pays for National Night Out. So that's a decrease. Our next section is the Public Safety or the Law and Justice Tax Fund. Again, I looked at the beginning balance, so I'm looking at where we're going to end in 2018. I project a $30,000 increase. Public safety tax, and I put property taxes. I should have said sales tax dollars instead of property, but it looks like it will increase, and it's been over 18 increasing. And then interest earnings increased, and that's tied to the cash balance. As the cash balance increases, the fund receives more interest. Tourism Expansion Fund, based on our 2018 expenditures, I think that the beginning balance will go down by about $10,000. And again, these beginning balances are just estimates. I'm trying to figure out where we're going to finish out 18 and to start us with 19. And then again, interest earnings tied to the cash balance, so I think it's going to go up by $3,500. General obligation bonds, really no large change. Community development block grants, beginning balance I will increase by the amount that is paid in by the different individuals by $1,800 because we still aren't spending any of that money. So it just continues to grow every year. REIT 1, beginning balance increase by $21,945, and then our interest earnings will increase by $1,500. REIT 2, beginning balance increase by $42,840, and interest earnings $600. And where this REIT 2 is coming from is, I believe, We had some park improvements that didn't finish out this year, so that just pushes it into next year's beginning balance. So if we don't spend the money this year, it becomes more revenue in the beginning year of the beginning balance. Okay. Fire Equipment Reserve Fund, beginning balance increased $21,235. Again, if we don't spend it this year, it rolls into next year's beginning balance. And interest has increased. So now let's go to water and sewer funds, and Delilah will pass out a proposed rate increase that we're going to talk about and tie it back into the other few things, and then one moving forward. So in 2013, HLA contracted with the city to complete a water and rates update. And they basically looked at all of the future projects, and they decided what we needed to do to increase water and sewer rates. And so there was a phase 1 study that recommended a 1.5 increase in 14, followed by a 2.5 annual increase 2015 through 2018, and no increase in sewer revenues. So that has sunsetted. And so in 19, I'm recommending in the water and sewer funds, no increases. So those actual funds, I'm not recommending any increases to rates or the cost of service. So you'll see the proposed utility increases paper that Delilah just handed out, though it does show some increases, and they are in city tax. And that's what we talked about just a few minutes ago in the general fund. And you'll see city tax from 19% to 29%. That's a 10% increase. On someone's utility bill, it goes from $15.45 to $23.58. Okay?
What is the tax assessed on? Is it on the total bill? Or
No, it is only on the water, sewer, and garbage funds,
water, sewer, and garbage, not stormwater?
not stormwater.
Okay.
And I'll get to the stormwater increase as I go through. So I just wanted to give you a preview of where I'm at with water, sewer, no rate increase to the actual rate, but there is a proposed 10% rate to the utility tax, which benefits the general fund. So you'll see the water fund has a beginning balance increase estimated to be about $500,000. And again, that's from savings that we've had. 310 taxes shows a negative 421. And what that is we were budgeting this in the water fund and budgeting it in the general fund, but there were never actually any revenues that were actually put for the taxes into the water fund. So now it just needs to be deleted from that fund. So it's not a real decrease. It just was budgeted there and also budgeted in the general fund. So we should have had them one place or the other, kind of pick your poison. Where do you want to put it? And then interest earnings increased because obviously it has a large cash balance, so we put additional interest earnings. And the bond reserve revenue, we're not going to change any of these. And then the water capital project fund, we will do no changes unless we decide to move those capital project funds into this fund. The sewer fund, the beginning balance, and you'll see it's an estimated decrease of $1 million, and that's because of the screw press completion, and we just made a conscious decision to fund the balance for this purpose. So we knew that. It was something that we planned. And again, the taxes is another item that is budgeted and receipted in the general fund, and it was being duplicated over here, so it's just a matter of moving that budget over. Sewer connection fees declined in 2018, so I just put a decline and took it off, kind of lowered it for 2019. And then interest earnings, again, is tied to cash balance, so that increased. And then the revenue, or the bond reserve, revenue bond fund, and capital funds, same thing as water funds. Now we have separate funds for all those so that I can account for them separately from each other. And garbage fund. You'll see that I have it as a beginning balance decrease estimated to be at negative $25,000. And then the taxes, again, are budgeted and receipted in the general fund, so I removed those from this fund and made sure they were only in the general fund. Garbage rate change is not known until October, and that's tied to the consumer price index. And there's also a tipping fee increase, so we won't know those until October, probably late October. So as soon as I know those, I'll update the charges for goods and services on the garbage rates.
I thought we got a report on the increase in tipping fees.
We did, but I want to make sure everything is solid and I know all my numbers and I have all of my rate sheets all made up so that I have the CPI and then I know how much that I'm in.
To calculate, right? Because we know what tipping fee increased to.
Right.
So I know that last year they did the, I was on the group in Yakima that did the waste treatment thing, waste
Management,
Yeah,
yes.
and I know they set in stone, basically the commissioners signed what the tipping fee was going to increase to, so we know that part.
And so what I do every year is I build a rate table for garbage, and it's because there's many rates in that spreadsheet that starts with your smallest size can all the way up to your largest size container. So I want to make sure that we've reviewed all of those numbers and that I get the tipping fee increase right, and then I actually send it to Yakima Waste for review so they can agree with me on my numbers.
Okay.
So I didn't want to put anything in here until I had all of that work done. And the October CPI is what we actually use for those to start those rates off. And then we did have a small amount of interest tied to the cash balance. So ambulance fund. So this fund had a negative beginning balance in 2018 of $120,000. I'm proposing that we increase the ambulance utility rate by 100% and have additional property taxes. So let me give you the proposal for the ambulance. Thank you. So we have two options. Option one is raising the utility in incremental amounts of $1.20 a month for the entire year of 2019. And so it's kind of taking a small bite out of a big dollar by doing it this way. So basically your rate would start at $8.28 in December, and then in January on that bill it would go to $9.48 and so on. I'm sure you can follow the logic. It's basically taking it in small bites every month instead of one big large increase. So option two is simply taking the rate as it is now and doubling it and charging $16.56 the entire year. There is not a significant amount of change for 2019, but where we would see the difference is in 2020. And this would get our rate to a rate where I think we could live within our means in the ambulance fund and not have a negative balance.
Where are we at as far as comparison to other cities similar in size as far as what we charge for this rate?
Well, our rate is kind of difficult to compare because we do it based on ERUs. So you have to know how many people they employ, and I mean, and that's the downfall of this rate in some ways. And so one of the suggestions that I'm also going to make is that we have this rate code read that it is whatever the fee is. So I put X.XX fee per address and or fee for all businesses with 4 or more employees based on the number of ERUs. One of the things that we have difficulty with is if you have a vacant lot, are you required to pay for ambulance service? And so the question becomes, is that something that a household should have to pay for a vacant lot or an empty house? Well, the unfortunate part of it is if you have a little kid that goes, or an adult, or like maybe me, I'm walking on your property and I fall and break my leg, the ambulance still has to go to that property. But that property owner hasn't been contributing to this ambulance service. So we need to make a decision on if we're going to charge it to every address, because right now we don't. We basically empty lots, vacant houses, all of those don't contribute, and I think that they should at least pay a minimum or a base or some kind of amount equal to contributing to this utility. And this is a utility tax. It's an assessment on your property, basically saying that you have the potential to have this service and everyone needs to contribute. So part of getting this fund whole is having the ability to then go out and audit by looking at every property in our system and saying, yes, 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 so that it's spread fairly to everyone.
Because there are property owners for these vacant lots.
Yes,
Just because there's nobody living there doesn't mean there's not a property owner who ought to be paying some sort of insurance on it.
correct.
So, and I remember it's probably been between 5 and 10 years ago where this conversation came up and they says, oh no, we're not going to do that. But I think it's time we do.
And I think the oh no, we don't want to do it thing is valid because we want to be fair and equitable, but I also want to be fair and equitable to the people on each side of that property that have children that go into that property and hurt themselves and need ambulance service. So they've paid the fee, but that vacant lot hasn't. And I think
I
that
absolutely agree with that.
Well, I kind of disagree with that because an empty lot, nobody should be living in the lot to begin with, or there's nobody to be bound to be hurt in that property. So the people who's going to get hurt are the people who live around it. So I don't see why the property owner who has an empty lot should be paying for some service that he's never going to receive, other than the neighbors might receive because they're the ones that trespass on the property.
May I interject?
Yes, please.
Mr. Guerrero, I would suggest that he takes his lawnmower out there and the blade breaks off and he chops his leg off. He's going to need an ambulance. He's on that property, okay, and that's what we're talking about here. Again, you've got a vacant lot and then you decide to build a house. You've got construction workers there, they could get hurt. You could be out there just mowing the lawn and having a heart attack and still need services.
The person obviously pays tax somewhere else already because obviously he doesn't live in the empty lot. That's what I'm trying to get to. Nobody lives at the empty lot. Yes, I agree. Somebody goes out there and they could get hurt, definitely.
Mhm.
But they're already paying taxes on the property they live at because obviously they have a residence at that location. So I disagree on that part. Yes, they're going to get hurt, but they're already paying for that tax at their primary residence. So I don't see why we should be taxing them twice on something that our service already paying at their own property.
That's assuming that someone lives in the city. What about the businesses that might own a parking lot or something along those lines?
Well, I don't think we'll be mowing a parking lot anytime soon. But yes, I completely understand. I was just using Mr. Day's thing because obviously, yeah, definitely could get hurt on that part. But if it's a parking lot, they're probably gonna have insurance.
Well, but that's another assumption. That's why, the finance director is trying to figure out some way that it's equitable so that we don't have people sliding through the cracks that are sort of getting the service that they're not really paying for.
And honestly, I don't think. I mean, how many calls of service have we got to an empty lot? I'll probably venture to guess probably one in the past 2 to 3 or 4 years. So I mean, I disagree with that one. I mean,
Can I say one other thing?
Go ahead.
So people don't pay a fire tax, all right? There's no set standalone fire tax. Those vacant lots are actually probably our biggest threat as far as our wildland-urban interface. So those catch fire, we send firefighters out there all the time. They're not paying for that service either. So the question is at what point are they going to just continue to get everything for free, or is it better off that we try to make this thing equitable? So on the flip side, so what I'm saying is, so the house next door is not paying for that service, they're not paying for any services whatsoever. The other house on their side is paying for ambulance service. Regardless of really who's doing it, or it should be everybody that owns a property in the city limits should be sort of supporting the city. And I think your assumption is, though, that they're paying that fee based off of that they may live in the city. And I can see that where, say, you own, my house in the city, I'm paying the fee, the tax, and I'm paying my ambulance utility. But what about a lot of these properties actually are owned by outside the area investment companies. 2600 Yakima Valley Highway, I had to hunt somebody down to try to find out who owns that property because we had a problem with the fire alarm system and it's essentially a foreign-owned company. So all we're doing is really gifting public funds and whether services, whether they use those services or not are a different thing. People pay for the ambulance utility whether they use it or don't use it. It's the same thing with the property owner, should be paying for it whether they use it or don't use it.
Well, I disagree with that part of it. Obviously, when you said about a fire in a lot, that's why we have court enforcement. They should be out there. I was talking to Mr. Day.
But again.
And no, again, I'm not gonna get off my high horse because I'm on it right now. So, court enforcement should be out there with. I have a property in my neighborhood who I've complained about it once, and they went and mowed the weeds. But the stove is still in the yard, the couch is still in the yard. I was like, are you kidding me? What are we paying a court enforcement for if he's not doing his job? So when you're saying there's a fire in an empty lot, there still be court enforcement making sure there's no weeds in that property to begin with. So we have mitigating factors along the way, and I completely disagree with this, that we're trying to charge somebody something that they're never going to use in that empty lot, because it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. We're just trying to tax somebody because we can, and obviously that's who we are, the taxing authority for the city of Sunnyside. But I completely disagree on that one. I'm 100% against that part of it, to be honest with you. That's my opinion, and
Yeah,
I'm sticking to it.
I understand that. The thing that I think that way I see it is that this property is being held, if somebody owns it, somebody, and you walk out there like Elizabeth says, and you fall, you break your leg, ambulance has to come. So do you pay for that ambulance call, or does the person?
The person who broke their leg, it's their fault they broke the leg, and
Well, it's not
if,
fault, that's
if
an
they are,
accident.
if they are the neighbors, then the neighbor's going to be going into the property to begin with.
Well, it's not even about that. I mean, I think it just has to. I just think if you're going to be equitable with the fire strategy, it needs to be all properties.
And I think this would be inequitable, because obviously that person already paid taxes on their property, and that's an empty lot they're going to hopefully develop at
But
one
this isn't
point.
a property tax. This isn't a property tax that we're talking about.
But it's a
here.
tax though. So you're taxing
It is
for
a tax,
an
but it's not,
ambulance that they're never going to use
it's
their
not a property
property.
tax, it's a fire tax, basically. I'm,
It's an ambulance
an
utility.
ambulance,
Yes.
an ambulance.
EMS, ambulance utility.
I have a question on that. Some of this property in the city is agriculture yet. It's not even a lot, it's a large field. Would that be, are you thinking of that on that as well?
And we
or-
what I'm trying to propose here is that it's just a flat rate. I'm not trying to say that we need to know how many agricultural workers are working in there. For a lot of these big open lots that don't have buildings, it would just be a flat fee. So it wouldn't be like I was asking them to come up with something crazy that we went ahead and did. What I'm saying is at least every property has an assessment for the ambulance utility
I think you just have to think of it in those terms.
as an assessment.
As an assessment.
Yeah, and it's a lot like
The
in
fast word for tax, basically.
Well,
we're taxing him for
and
it.
it's
But it's still an assessment.
I think of it as the same as like a really honestly an irrigation fee. It's much like that. You pay for it whether you get it or not,
Whether you get
and that is your right to that service.
That's what
and
irks me the most, because I own a property that is charged by SVID every year for the past 16 years, and they say they're not going to put water in that street, but they still charge them for irrigation. And the developer in that neighborhood, they just never put lines. So we're stuck with the
I
tax.
live in the same area,
SVID.
not the same place, but I have the same problem that I get to pay SVID every year for doing nothing for me, and they'll never do it unless I pay a whole bunch of money to install something, and it's not going to. So that's the decision I make as a homeowner, that I don't. I mean, and that's the same thing. I think to make this utility whole, though, we do really need to look at how we're doing the rates and how we want to increment it. So what I'd really like is feedback from the council to know if you think we would be in a stronger position with citizens by increasing it a little bit at a time every month, or biting the bullet in January and doubling the rate.
On the, where you increase monthly, I think you end up higher than what the average is, don't you?
In the very long bottom line, you do. And I'll tell you what is sustainable really is option one. Option one is sustainable, and we don't have to keep going back. We can reevaluate in 2020 and see where our rate is and what our utility looks like. Right now, what I'm facing is we have a shortfall already for 18, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it up in 19. I mean, you would think that as a finance person, I would come to you and say, I really want the option two, but I think option one is actually a better deal for our citizens, and it's not going to hurt as bad to them to have $1.20 every month.
And it makes sense, that makes a great deal of sense, too, to be able to just, so they get used to it, too. So it's not such a big chunk out of their budget all at once.
It's easier to take small bites than one big bite. But on that same note, it's harder for the finance people to figure out the new rates based on that. So you'll notice I only used the option 2 in my example, just because it's harder to figure that out.
I don't know if everybody realizes it, but we're talking about the city tax and the ambulance tax going up at the same time on their water bill, which they're going to see every single month.
Yep.
And they're going to know we are the ones who authorize that increase. Obviously, it sounds like there's a big need for this. Obviously, I just don't know why the ambulance rate needs to increase if we are. Don't we charge for ambulance use to begin with?
So some of the issue that we have with charging for the ambulance use is we are not fully reimbursed for every single thing that goes on that board. And a lot of our patients that we have are Medicaid, Medicare, and we are not reimbursed at the full amount that we are billing out. So if everybody had fabulous health insurance and we were taking a lot of people at that rate, you would not have this issue with our ambulance fund. But really what has happened, and we actually knew that this was going to happen in the end of 17, they are starting to decline portions of the bill. So if we have a person with regular health insurance that we bill $100, we might get $20 for Medicare for that same ride, same service. So it's really a function of having the kind of residents we have. We have to supplement that. We have to make the difference up between what someone who has regular insurance and someone who has Medicare or Medicaid.
Can I just let you know real quick what the deal is? So our ambulance utility actually does not fund the actual ambulance service, the amount of funds that it takes to operate the ambulance. It makes up that gap between what we do bill for and what we do collect versus what we actually are expenditures. That's why we started off with a negative balance. Because, and that's actually our declining revenues are not because of call volume dropping. Our call volume is actually going to increase. At this point, we're 16% above what it was in 2017. It went up between 2016 and 2017, went up 9.6%. The problem that we're running into is, once again, is Medicare is trying to pass. It used to be, at one point, it was Medicare did a 90 with a 10% copay, 20% copay, it's 30%. Now it's actually all Medicare patients, which is a highest proportion of our call volume, right? The Medicare patients have to sign, we have to force them to or obtain a signature from each of them now that says Medicare is probably not going to pay for this and you're going to pay for it. So what the government is trying to do is pass all that cost back on to the citizen, and now you're talking about people that are over 65, they're on fixed incomes, they just can't pay those bills. And as a result, we are writing off more and more. I think last year we wrote off $424,000 in what we could not collect. This year we're headed probably a little bit higher than that. They anticipated that we would generate $440,000 in revenues, and that was after doing $876,000 worth of billing. Our billing is based off of Medicare rates. So we're already billing a little bit on the low side to try to help people out where we can. We actually need to raise those because of another study that we just authorized, Mr. Day is negotiating with that GEMT project that I spoke about. But this is not going to stop this portion, this loss on the revenue side, because the way the government is setting it up it's designed basically to pass the cost to the citizens. Affordable Care Act was the beginning of it, and now it's really just going to start kicking in more and more and more. There are those programs, the GEMT program that I brought to you on the last meeting, that are to allow government entities to kind of take the brunt of that, but it still only funds 50% of that loss. So as a result, we are going to start with the way this breakdown is where we came to the amount that we need annually. With the changes, and this is also with some of the things that we may be doing if we enter into a contract with Grandview. The Grandview opportunity would give us another $602,000, I think, off the top of my head, in generated revenue. With the cost out of pocket cost would be probably about $500,000 of that. I think there was about $100,000 windfall in the opportunity. But even with that, with us trying to switch the way we're trying to do this thing because of the shortfall on it every year in the ambulance fund, the option is try to move things from a 60-40 split to a 70-30 split. All right. If we move to a 70-30 split, that's going to start us off with $185,000
beginning shortfall. Then we would have to move the 10% that we were putting onto the general fund over to the ambulance utility. That's another $240,000. You add in a couple other things from the $124,000 deficit that we started with at the beginning of the year to try to get the fund whole again, and we're at $628,000 shortfall already entering into 2019.
What's the biggest cost on this ambulance EMS fund? What is the
Payroll.
biggest? What is it?
Payroll.
Payroll? Okay.
Yeah. So,
You got
and to answer your question, go ahead.
Do you have too many employees then, or is that just?
We're
'cause
actually-
obviously, if it's not balancing itself out, then obviously there's something there that's not.
It's not designed to pay 100% of the cost. It's designed, so you have the option under, I brought the FCS study. We have the option as a city, how you want to fund the EMS portion of the fire department. You can opt to fund it at 100%. The previous city council members along the way through the ordinance did not choose to do that route. So as a result, what they did is they incrementally fund the shortfall. So the $8.28 that we've been collecting only pays for the shortfall. The difference between what we're able to collect in billing and what our expenses are. So every year, that changes. And these are designed, they're called a utility, so that you can fluctuate, increase that rate, lower the rate, increase the rate, et cetera, to make sure that you stay solvent every year, from year to year. This rate, in the last FCS study required by law, was done in 2012. At that time, they said that the rate needed to be at a minimum $8.76 per ERU. The rate today is still $8.28. So we've gone 6, almost 7 full years without raising the rate. And as a result, we have these ongoing shortfalls. We're trying to, in moving forward, to actually operate it like a utility. So if we had a big windfall and we end up building up a surplus, et cetera, right, we can then give back to the community and we can fluctuate that cost to the citizen year to year, instead of just charging them a fee and then hoping that we can operate with the amount of fee that we're collecting, right? If we went with the $1.20 per month option in option 1, right, it does come out to be higher at the end of the year because through the course of the year we're not collecting the amount we need. We still need to hit a goal of $646,000 is our goal. That will give us a little bit of cushion because we think that we need actual 628 is the bare minimum of what we do need. But moving forward, right, we would now start 2020 on the right foot. We would also have a little bit of surplus going into January 2020, and I actually think that we could probably lower the rate going into 2020 and probably be able to fund the ambulance program 100% just off the utility alone. If we were able to do that, then we could actually go back to the citizens and provide the out-of-pocket cost to the citizens would probably be $0 for ambulance rides in the city then.
Okay.
I would rather see a
Kind of
five.
takes us
go ahead.
away from just a second, it just sort of takes us away from the, whether we're going to do vacant lots or not there to kind of get into this. But, Mr. Strimler?
I would rather see like a $5 increase this year and then some next year, rather than do the 828 and then actually have a little surplus by the end of the year. I would rather do some this year and some next year, especially if we're going to add to the utility rates as well.
I would like to. I would like to see option 2. Just leave it there.
In agreement with Mr. Henry, I'd rather see option 2. It's better to take the one big bite and then it's constant all the way through than constantly increasing every month.
I don't like either option, but
Right.
obviously that needs to be done. And
There's no option 3. There's only
there's
2.
no option.
oh, no, there is option 3. You
There
know.
is option 3.
Not
That's
do
us.
anything. Not
make
do
option
anything.
We make it.
We've done that.
We make
before.
option 3. That's the different one.
Yeah.
But obviously, the city tax, we're going from 19 to 29. Can we do a percentage each year instead of just a one big 10%? 2018, 5% 2019, 5% 2020.
For the utility tax?
Yes, instead of, because that's a big chunk just to do that alone, and then the ambulance rate. If we're going to do the option 2, it just seems too much at once.
Well, the way they've broken it down here is this over for an average citizen, a resident, a water user, sewer user, et cetera, $18.31.
Is total for everything we're
total.
asking for, yes.
That's the total increase.
And the 2018 numbers, literally, we asked the billing clerk to print us a real utility bill and bring it to me, and we took these real numbers. So those are the actual somebody's real bill. I'm not going to tell you whose bill it
It
is.
looks like my
but-
bill, basically. That's what I pay, about $110 a month.
So we just found somebody, and I told her what I wanted is the usage. I told her I wanted someone with a 5, because I knew that was somebody that didn't have a very large consumption but had a fairly average rate. And so when we did this analysis, we took the actual numbers and just transferred them over to the 2019 with the new rates. And when I brought you to the table for revenues, and I did not bring expenditures, when I bring expenditures, I'm not even sure if these revenues will cover the expenditures that we need or that we have currently. And that's why Don said, if we don't raise the revenues, and if you'll remember when I was looking at the general fund, if you look back, and let's just take a real quick peek at our bottom line on page 7. And you'll see my 2018 number for revenues was $11,179,447.
Page 7.
Page 7. On the proposed budget changes, this one.
Other 7.
Let's
see.
7 that shows
Is that police? Which
Oh,
one
yeah,
is
the
it?
second section of it. The second
Oh,
7.
The second group after the blue
Second
tab.
group.
The second 7.
Well, you know what's probably easier? How about everybody look at the very last page with the summary? That's much easier for us to look at. That's the quick and dirty. You will see 2018. 11,179,447. You see the number I'm looking at now as well. 2019, I increased the utility tax to the general fund by 10%, and there's where I'm at. I'm still lower than my 2018 budget.
I'm not on the same page probably. I'm not seeing your numbers. The blue tab?
Very last page of the book.
Very last page of the book?
Yeah. It's a summary
Okay,
page.
very back.
Oh, back here.
Last page.
Sorry,
It's okay.
I got confused.
Oh, yeah, oh, wow, there was more.
So with the 10%
okay.
increase to the utility tax that contributes to the general fund, I'm still $3,974 less in revenues. So if my expenditures are the same, which you'll see I have big zeros in there for a reason, because I'm going to bring those back and we're going to look at those separately. I didn't make increases that were giving us a frivolous balance or giving us I'm not trying to get a 20% fund balance or some kind of outrageous dollar amount here in the general fund. I'm trying to keep things as flat as I can. And that means increases to the utility tax in order to get us there.
We talked about this when we did our retreat, too, that this was something we were going to really have to have serious discussion about.
What we're looking at is a 50% increase in the city tax and then a 100% increase in the ambulance fund.
Correct.
But again, that's to help pay for it, too.
That's a huge increase, though.
And I'll tell you, if I would have been here in 13 and 14, I would have been recommending that we do these in small chunks beginning way back. Mm-hmm. We really have not incrementally raised utility taxes that benefits the general fund. In fact, what we were doing before is we were actually doing interfund transfers from those utilities into the general fund instead of allocating the costs like we've changed.
You know, and when you do it, when you have to make these big bites like that, it sometimes is bigger just to take that big bite and bear with that. But then get yourself onto that schedule where, like with the water and the sewer fund, you're already building in those increments that they kind of come up and they just kind of go. And so they're automatic after a certain point in time. But when you don't do them for a long period of time, that's when they really, really hurt. And a lot of cities around us have seen that. And so I think we're seeing it now. We don't have an inner fund change thing anymore because we're doing the cost allocation. This is the best thing to be doing right now.
And, I took a look at, before I even brought this forward, whether we had a water and sewer rate increase. If I would have seen that we were still on the 2.5% water increase, I would have not requested the tax increase. I would have tried to find another way to do that, but I'm not sure how I would have found that. Mm-hmm. But one thing is when your water rate increases, your tax collection increases as well because it's a percentage of that. Mm-hmm. So it does incrementally bring that forward a little bit.
Exactly.
And I'm not sure if anyone remembers, but last year when I brought a comparison of our utility tax to other cities, we are very much lower than other cities.
We're lower than everyone else. And I think the same was true with our ambulance tax. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
You know what the average is approximately?
I don't have an average. Ken may know.
Sure, off the top of my head. So the other cities, we're one of the few. We're the only fire department in Yakima County that provides ambulance service. We're the only fire department in Yakima County that has an ambulance utility. In Benton County, they all three Tri-Cities have ambulance utility. They choose to do things a little bit differently. Our fire department budget equates to roughly 7% of the budget in the city. In those cities, it's 16 to 21%. So they choose, Richland is the lowest. Their utility is in the same ballpark as what ours is. Pasco, which has the most homogeneous population similar to Sunnyside, is actually in the process. Their rate study that they just went through recommended that they increase their rate to $26 or $27 per ERU. They use the ERU as we do. Kennewick, they got the same recommendation in 2017. They did not raise theirs in 2017 because the same thing. They are funding their fire department because the fire department is more fire department operations and less EMS. We're very heavily into EMS. That's why I said we were looking at potentially moving from a 60-40 split to a 70-30 split. If we don't raise the ambulance utility, we actually may have to move more back to the general fund because we won't be able to operate our EMS operations solely off of that utility like that. So to answer your question, though, Richland is similar in price. Pasco, I just spoke last week with their finance director. They're pushing to increase it all the way to $26 per ERU. And $23 per ERU. It's currently at 11 or 12. And then Kennewick, they haven't said what they're doing.
Just out of curiosity, you said that Yakima County, we're the only ones that have
We are the only fire department that has ambulances in all Yakima
Really?
County. Yes.
Is that just because? I know about 6 years ago, the council was talking about getting rid of ambulance services. Is that because the reason why? Because nobody else was offering and.
That's right. Oh, you mean I'm
No, you weren't here, but before I came on board, council was talking about getting rid of just ambulance service altogether and contracting it out to I don't know what agency.
EMS.
Private
or
companies.
Yes, or
And there's
AMR.
right, and the private companies, it's not enough money for them, not enough call volume down here for them to do it.
So that's why we're stuck with it, basically.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. I mean, we're getting a double bang for our dollar because we have to have a fire department, and so right now we're using all the firefighters. Everybody is cross trained and they can do both the EMS and the fire side. Otherwise, we would end up spending a couple $1 million for guys to just sit there waiting for a fire, which is not quite as frequent as an EMS call. Right now, we run somewhere in the ballpark of 8 calls a day on the ambulance. That's too much that volunteers could run, and it's not enough that the private ambulances would be interested in doing it because our collection rate is so low. I think on average, we only collect somewhere $189 per call.
And then we had like 3 or 4 ambulances going to the call, so that adds to the cost, I'm sure.
Well, no. What we do is when some of these calls, law requires that we can't put, say, for example, a motor vehicle collision, right? If there's two vehicles involved and there's injuries in each vehicle, we cannot put 2 patients in the same ambulance that are from separate vehicles, because they would be in the courtroom, they would be opposites of each other. So we're not allowed to put two patients in the same ambulance, so that requires two ambulances right there. Right now, we don't staff. We staff one ambulance, and if possible, we're able to get second ambulance, and that's all with this cost. That's why we really need more than what we actually have. But it is what it is. We're in tight times.
Well, shall we move along with the rest of these then?
So I will leave the option 1, option 2 on the table, but I would, when we come back for the next session, like some kind of decision on that. And I'll tell you, to answer your question, I've brought option 1 and option 2 as the only options, and if I could find a way to reduce it, I would. But I think what we are looking at is, again, this is the revenue side. When I bring the expenditure side back, that's when we're going to have to match these up, and you will see exactly where things are matching, and we're very close. And I wouldn't bring forward revenues and suggestions if I thought I could raise it by $5, and then that would be good enough. I would do that. I'm not trying to look for humongous reserves. I think we do need to have reserves in places so that we are, if there's something that unexpected comes up, we can fund it. But I do think that we should be looking at having a little bit of reserves in every one of our funds. And really, all of our funds are not at the position to have a reserve at all. Okay, so let's move on to the Stormwater Fund. This is another one that everybody's just going to love because we have a negative beginning balance in 2018, and I'm estimating it to have a zero balance in 19, so that's a $20,000 decrease. Charges for drain sales and service, this is a rate increase of 50%. So if you'll look at the proposed utility increase, you will see stormwater currently is at $3.75. Our proposal is to bring it to $5.65. And again, this is per lot. And that increases our revenues by $24,500. Yes.
Does that count like Walmart and all that?
Yes, and we are proposing to come forward with a study, which we're currently working with Hubert C. Lohman, to look at how to charge all of the larger lots, places
my house
with.
doesn't use anywhere near the stormwater drain off. As
And
parking lot.
we realize that, but we also have some history with the Stormwater Fund where we implemented some changes and some rates, and some people with open land got bills for thousands and thousands of dollars. So we want to take this on a slow and steady way and make sure that we aren't charging too much or charging too little with a small increase now. And then once that rate study comes out and we actually have a position where we can tell you, okay, this is how we're going to charge these people and it's equitable, then we'll come back with another rate that's for larger, like Walmarts or places that have a lot of runoff.
Area
Yes.
versus open ground that's going to absorb.
Yep. So this is just an incremental increase so that we can get the fund whole, because it does have a negative beginning balance. And I want the fund to be whole, so that's really all I'm trying to do is get it whole. And then equipment rental fund, increasing revenues, and this is a direct pass-through to other funds. So when we see the expenditure side, this is just a kind of a housekeeping to get us up to an amount that I think is based on a Public Works union contract. And I may find when my expenditures come, I need to increase this a little bit, but this is where I'm at with it. Information Technology Fund, again, direct pass-through to other funds, so raise it up just a tiny bit. Fiduciary funds, you'll see that really with these, we have increase the beginning balance for jail receipts. Sunnyside Court Trust Fund, decrease the beginning balance by $40,000 and increase receipts by $45,000. So it's a $5,000 difference. And these are really just kind of different things that we have. Decreasing the state court fines that's a pass-through fund. So we owe a portion of tickets to the state. So they come in to that fund and then we pay them back out of that fund. So as we've seen our citations are down, I expect this fund to go down a little bit. Fireman's Relief and Pension Fund, I'm increasing the beginning balance, and I'm going to move the fire insurance to the general fund. And it's actually an increase of $84,350 to the fund by increasing our beginning balance. And we still are able to move about $17,000 over to the general fund that is part of this fire insurance premium. What I'd like to do is this pension fund, I would like to do another actuary study to find out what this fund balance actually needs to be. We currently have one pensioner that we're paying, and then we're paying some retirees' insurance premiums out of this. The fund has a very healthy balance, about $300,000. I think that it should be sufficient to pay for what we have, but I'd need to hire a group to do that. So probably on the expenditure side, I'd like to have permission to do that. And the very last item you'll see at the very bottom, it is Fund 699, and that is the Transportation Benefit District. We've talked about it, we've kicked the can, we've decided sometimes we want to do it, sometimes we don't. In hopes that we can pass this, I've added it as a true fund, and I've said there it is. And our expected revenues, if we collect it all in 1 year, would be about $230,000. My hope would be is that we could pass the $20 car tab, put it into this fund, and save it for when we have a local match for the street projects, and start using this for our match money, using it for a sidewalk improvement program. It is dedicated to our streets and sidewalks. So this would be a fund that is in fiduciary nature for right now. We would ask to come to council, and we've talked about this and talked about it. I think that it's time that we actually implement this. All the cities around us are doing it. We have, and they have used it for those purposes as matching funds. They've been doing it for years and years and years, and their economy is not much different than ours. Their customer base is not different than ours. And I think we just have to get with the mindset that we're trying to make improvements in our town, and this is really the only way we can do that and have a healthy fund balance, is by using this as our local match. So that's my recommendation on the transportation improvement plan, or transportation benefit district.
You're paying at $20 per vehicle, sounds like, right?
$20 per vehicle.
That would be nice, for sure.
It really
I know
would.
We talked about it, and from the last time we discussed it, there was some support for it, so
Yeah.
just a matter of bringing it back. Hopefully, we get everybody on the same page.
And a number of different councilmen I've talked to, I think there is some more support for it this year. And as much as that, knowing that we need to increase those revenues. And this one, set up the way it is for streets and for sidewalks and for matching funds, I think that gives it there's still a lot of streets with potholes, and I can't eat that many pizzas for Domino's to come in and fix those. So
We've actually talked about that.
I was thinking about that myself, but still, I think it's time we do it. We passed a resolution last year to set the district in place and to implement it when we thought we needed to, and I think now we need to. The need is here now.
I put $230,000. I don't expect us in 2019 to get all of those revenues, because again, we'd have to go through the process, get the fund, and actually it's its own entity, so we'd have to create that entity, and then we'd have to absorb it into us. So there is quite a lengthy process to go through.
Paperwork involved.
And then you have to work with the state Department of Licensing to get it actually assessed on there. And then we have to do all the accounting for it. So it may take a couple years to see $230,000 in this fund, but I put that as a placeholder of what we projected 2 years ago on what the revenue would be.
So will we find during this election cycle if was it Wyman guy, the initiative he's putting together?
Tim
Hyman.
Hyman.
Yeah, is he? I know they talked about trying to bring it back down to $30 again. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with that. So at this point, if we put it into place, and if it doesn't happen, then we still
We still have it, and
shape it for
yeah,
anything.
and then
Okay.
And this almost doesn't even have anything to do with what our license tab is, because this is a separate fee.
right. It's a separate taxing district,
Yeah.
is what it is.
So
So that is the
But
worst.
This is for the tabs, right?
Yes, this
Yes.
would be the $20
All right,
car
I thought
tab,
It would be
Well,
added
I thought
to
you said it
your
was
Added
different.
to-
license.
but
added
it
to
is-
your
it is-
license fee.
Right.
You have
And
your,
to
you
whatever
have your
else
fee that's
you
for
pay on
your
your tabs.
Vehicle,
vehicle,
and then
and then
this
this is
for
on
the
top
city.
of that,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So if he did reduce it back down to the 39, we'd still only be 50, so
Okay.
it's still be good. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So that's really all I have tonight. I do encourage you to review all of the information in your book. If you have questions, please let Mr. Day know and we'll prepare answers for you. And then I'd like to ask everyone to bring this back when we cover the expenditure side because we'll be making some comparisons to where we're at.
You want us to put these in the very back? That way kind of.
I hole punched them for you so you could put them in your book
That's
so
ideal.
you'd have them. And I thank you for your time tonight. I know it gets kind of tiring, but I was hoping if we covered things in increments, it wouldn't be quite so much
Yeah,
to deal with.
Appreciate it.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
so that, just so I can leave you with a little bit of a tidbit, we've given you a lot tonight. We need direction. There's always options, okay? It's not just option A or B, okay? As Mr. Strimler mentioned, it could be $5. We need you as a council to tell us what we're gonna do, okay? And we're recommending that you initiate the $20 tab on the license. That will go a long way to relieving the pain on the general fund, okay? It won't solve every bit problem we have. We're recommending an increase in the ambulance fund, okay? We feel that I think it was 16-something, the first, doubling it, would
1656.
provide enough funding to make us healthy and whole, okay? So that the ambulance fund could support itself with what it collects. We are also trying to increase our collections, okay? So we're taking a stab at this from various directions, okay? So, but what we're asking for is give us something to work with, okay? So what I'd ask you to do tonight is, and over the next few days, is look at these options and come up with something that you feel you can support, okay? And then we'll have some additional discussions at the next meeting and hopefully have a conclusion, okay? That's really where we need to go. We have to build a budget based on the revenues that we project. We need to increase revenues. It's that simple. Or we're going to have to be letting people off, okay? Your biggest expenditure is the police, okay? Next is going to be fire, public works. Again, if quite frankly, I would suggest you're not making wise decisions if you gut City Hall and eliminate all the parks workers and stuff like that. We could save $100,000, just close the pool. I don't think you'll get reelected, but you could do that, okay? So that is an expense. So we need to figure out where we're going to go with this. And had we done this 5 and 6 and 7 years ago, increase these gradually, we'd be talking about a 2.5 or 2% increase in costs. But we haven't kept up with inflation, okay? The cost of doing business is over 20% higher than it was 10 years ago, okay? We haven't kept up, and that's where we're at with this. So please consider these. So that we can make a decision, you can give us the direction, and then we'll have to go back and fine-tune these numbers. If you come back and say, we're not giving you 29%, Mr. Day, we'll give you 22 on the utility tax, that's what we'll live with. If you come back and say, on the ambulance fee, we're not giving you $16, Mr. Day, we're giving you 12, that's what I'll live with, and that's what I'll have to crunch those numbers with. But, again, I'm recommending you give us something, okay? And I'd like, quite frankly, all of what we asked for. But I understand the reality of it as well, too.
Can't we put a toll booth at Walmart, charge $1
Right.
a car?
You know, by golly, I'll tell you what, if I could put a toll booth at that left turn right there, that'd be a
dandy.
moneymaker.
That'd be dandy.
But again, there's always options to consider, all is not lost. We need to increase revenues, okay? We are still recruiting retail businesses. We hope to get 1 or 2 big players this next year. We're going to continue to do that to try to increase your sales tax revenues. We're still looking at other options. These are some options that we've talked about in the past, and they've just kind of laid there and laid dormant. And with everything, all the changes in Medicare, it's just phenomenal once you start looking into this. Everybody thinks, golly gee, it costs $700-800 to ride in an ambulance. An ambulance only makes money when the red lights are on, okay? When somebody's got an emergency. The other 23 hours a day, you're paying that bill for those guys to do nothing, or polish fire trucks, or whatever it is you're doing, okay? So 8 calls a day on a 24-hour period, that's not that many, okay? That's the only time that ambulance is making money. We're only collecting about 50%, little over 50%, 44.8 on our runs, okay? So you start talking the math, calculating how much it costs us to have an employee, we're limited, okay? We could eliminate the ambulance service. There's no law that requires you to provide ambulance services. You're required to have fire and police, but you're not required to have ambulance. Don't know why, probably because back in the 1800s they didn't have ambulances, okay? So that's the way it is. They're not required, and it's going to be what it's going to be, okay? Quite frankly, I would think that's a political bad decision, okay, to eliminate it, but you're not going to get much savings by eliminating the ambulance service, okay, because you're still going to have a fire department. You could go mostly volunteers if you wanted to, but that's a risk you take, okay? So, I mean, we've always got options, and that's all I'm telling you. You do have options. You could explore those options and move from there again. And so, but I really think that the people of this community like the ambulance service. They voted overwhelmingly, I understand, to enact the utility tax for ambulance service. I think you guys have been around longer than I, so I mean, it was happened a long time ago.
It did.
And so it might be something that they would support an increase on, okay? So please consider it, and we can talk more and come up with a solution. I really feel that there's a solution in there somewhere that will help increase the revenues and prevent layoffs and rifts. Okay? Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Is there anything else to come before us this evening? Hearing nothing, hearing no objections, we adjourn the meeting. 8:15.
Chad?